All right. I welcome everybody. Back here on Friday. We're going to start a new painting. I'm going to do a painting of Jim Carrey as his character Joel in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. It's probably like not your typical Jim Carrey painting. Rags here. I think Jim Carrey's probably, excuse me, underappreciated in his dramatic roles. I think he's a really fine dramatic actor as well as a great comedian. I've been a big fan of his work since Living Color days when I first saw him there. So I'm going to talk about the process that I'm going to be using as I go through it. I'm going to use some of the same methods and techniques I've been using the last couple of weeks. I'm working on an 11 by 14 inch canvas. It's a pre-stretched Belgian linen canvas. It's pre-gessoed and all that stuff. So I like using those pre-stretched and gessoed canvases just because I don't really like to spend all the extra preparatory work if I don't have to. And sometimes I'll stretch my own canvases if it's particular size I want to work with, or but I like to do this as often as possible. So let's talk about the colors I'm using. I'm using some of the pretty much the same palette I used for my Rick Grimes painting last week. That started last week. I uploaded a second session of that this morning on my YouTube channel. So I'll go through the colors here. I have Indigo Blue, Burnt Umber, Raw Umber, Aliziran Crimson, Burnt Sienna, Cadmium Red LIght, Yellow Ochre, Naples Yellow, and then I have Portland Gray Light, Medium and Dark, and then I have a Paynes Gray. So let's get started. The references that I'm using are visible on the screen on the upper right. So if you want to at some point follow along with what I'm doing here, you're welcome to do that. So let's get started. I'm going to take these raw umber and burnt umber colors and mix them together, blend them down with some mineral spirits. I use odorless mineral spirits. I don't upset my lungs quite nearly as much as turpentines do. You're by all means welcome to use the more harsher solvents. In fact, I'm probably going to start moving away from solvents altogether as I watch what some other artists are doing, and I think this is just the way I was sort of raised up in using oil paints. I moved to odorless mineral spirits some time back after getting chemical pneumonias from using harsher solvents. If you're using turpentines or anything like that, you must have some ventilation or you're going to make yourself sick, and it's probably not worth that. The reason I use oil paint, I had somebody ask me recently somewhere on social media, why is it that I use oil paints instead of acrylics? And one of the main reasons technically is I just like that oil paints don't dry nearly as fast as acrylics. I find it very aggravating that acrylics will dry while I'm working with them on the palette. They also, they don't stay wet. Like they dry solidly, so you end up with a lot more wasted paint. I do use acrylics to embellish my artist proof prints, and over the last years that I've been doing that, I've found ways to make acrylics work more like oils using different sort of mediums. Maybe I'll go into that at some point, how that works. But all right, let's get started with this painting right here. I'm gonna create some more space for myself as I bump the camera and screw everything up. Give me 1 second here. All right. So like I've done in the last few of these, I'm going to basically wipe out the shapes. Excuse me, I'm just arranging things here a little better. All right, so create where his head is, and where I'm just blocking in the shape. I'm using a cloth painting rag that you can buy at hardware stores. And I bump everything there. Still getting used to doing these these setups of having all this stuff hanging around me while I'm trying to work. It takes some getting used to. And but it's fun. I hope people are enjoying these little demos. The idea is to encourage people to be creative, to show that it's not really difficult to do. You don't have to be good to get started at something. I think mainly you just need to have the interest and the desire to want to do it. You shouldn't really be comparing yourself and like worrying if you're not as good as somebody else, that you shouldn't be doing it, having too many expectations on yourself. It should be fun. And that's the main reason to do it, is that it's fun. And it's fun to create something that wasn't there before, and it's also fun to just, you never know how these are going to turn out, and sometimes they turn out really cool and sometimes not. And so we don't know what's going to happen most of the time. Have a general plan, and then you get to it, and sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. So what I'm doing here is basically just blocking in the shape of his face. We've got hair coming down in front of his face, so we're going to try to separate, for the time being, the main shapes, which would be like his face, his blocks of hair, the background, his shoulders, all that kind of good stuff. And I do that with bigger brushes first. I do, like you can see, I'm not really worried about the features quite yet. If I start trying to like noodle his eye in and draw in his eyebrows and not have the bigger overall shaping worked out correctly, I'm gonna end up having to just paint over, rework that sort of stuff, and we want to avoid as much of the extra work as possible. I try to find a way to do things as efficiently as I can. That's the challenge that I have for my paintings, for myself. And sometimes I do better jobs than others at that. Sometimes these paintings, they just kind of come together, and sometimes it's like trying to keep a train on the tracks. The smaller paint, it's easier to sort of focus on this sort of thing on the smaller pieces, where you don't have so many complex parts, I guess. All right, so I'm gonna try to figure out where to get started on this, and it takes a little bit to kind of get into the groove, so just take your time. Yeah, I'm still just working with these raw umber colors. I'm gonna sort of mark where his eyes are, and now I'm just gonna scribble around things and see what happens. Eyebrows, and don't be afraid to just wipe something off. It's not working for you. You get going on a piece and it's crappy, you don't like it, you can always just start over. And I did that with the Rick Grimes painting last week. I had got a little start on something, decided I didn't like it, and I just started over completely with a slightly different composition, and then that worked out pretty nicely. I'm going to move to a bigger brush. So I was using this house painting brush to block in. I'm going to use a different painting brush, which is about the same size. It's made for art, though. This actually, I'm not going to use that brush. It's too big. I really need to get some new brushes. Kind of like, I never buy new clothes either. Need to maybe think about that. like one outfit forever is the kind of the way I roll. I really don't care about that kind of stuff too much. All right, so let's keep blocking in his kind of the side of his face, creating some shadow, and creating the shadow of where his eyes are. We got to remember there's a skull in here, so we can start sort of pinpointing where those things are. There's his nose, his mouth, and one thing I wanted to capture with this, the reason I kind of picked this is the emotion in this movie is pretty heavy, and that seemed to interest me to see if I could capture this look on Jim Carrey's face, this sort of emotional quality that permeates the movie, and I wanted to explore that. I think it's more interesting too if you're going to paint portraits of people to make them a living people, like they're alive or something. That they're not just posing for a painting. When I use and paint people in my own work, I generally will have models that are actors, mainly because they're really good at expressing these emotions on cue and trying to catch it out of people when they're, not paying attention is one thing, but when I have a sort of quality I'm going for, I will rely on actors to help me sort that out. All right, so I think I have his eye too high. As you can see, it often starts out pretty rough and crappy, and and there's no real. I don't really have a formula. Sometimes it's like the more you do these things, the better they start out even. So a lot of this is just lots of practice and trial and error, and really trying to see shapes. Got Jim Carrey's face. I think I might have this too big. I'm like his face is too big on the composition. And I'm gonna end up painting him going off the top and the bottom. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm going to just chop this down a bit, and I'll get a bigger brush out to do that. Like this. Keep moving his eye. I think I need to move his eye up. Something over here. He's got the movement of his eyes kind of have this sort of puppy dog look. Like I'm just gonna make some brush strokes that are just kind of imitate that expression that I want to catch. Continue to do that. His mouth is going to come up too, so let's wipe that out. And scribble in his chin. Right here. That. So push and pull, just moving some paint around, getting warmed up. Sad Jim Carrey. Oh, all right, there's a big sad face. And it's also kind of pretty wild right now. All right. And he's got sort of some facial hair. He's creating some shapes here. His nose is up here. Look more like Charles Bronson. Maybe I'll just change it to Charles Bronson. Keep just pulling us around. Got this shape of the cheekbones right here. That. All right, this is looking not like Jim Carrey at all, but bear with us. We're going to get to it. I will get there. All right. So I continue to block that in. So it's a constant push and pull of shape and edge relationships. Let's do that. And I can tell that it's not correct. All right. Let's do this. And if something's not working, just paint it out and redo it. Don't be worried. I'm not gonna hurt anybody's feelings here. Nobody's gonna die. You know, this is one of those things about being creative is like you have, you know, if you're gonna do this in a way that you want to like make a living at it, you're gonna have to really learn to be critical of your own work as you're doing it and hold yourself to standards that other people aren't gonna necessarily hold you to with the quality of what you're doing. And not that you have to beat yourself up if it's not perfect, and we're not trying to achieve perfection, but if there's something you know that you can do better, then you should do it better. You do it to the best of your ability. And that's the way to get good at anything, is to just keep doing it. And what I'm going for isn't necessarily, it's got to look like, so I have a bunch of references, and I'm not trying to really copy a reference as much as I am trying to, like, when I know something looks right, it has that feeling, it feels right more than it, you know, than the details are in the right spot. It doesn't necessarily look like the photograph. So his jawline squares off below his lips over here. Okay, I'm going to, I think, I could push and pull this all day and not get it right. I think what I need to do is go ahead and lay in some different color here. Let me think about what I want to do with that. I'm going to, let me do this. Going to take, what do I have here? So I'm going to take this sort of angled chisel flat brush, and I like these brushes a lot for creating a variation of flat brush strokes. So you can create, you know, broad flat strokes like this. You can create lines, and you can also use this tip to do thin things with, you know, like noodling. So there's a lot of variation you can do with this one style of brush. Which is why I like it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this cadmium red light, and I'm going to take some Portland gray medium. Now what this gray will act like, it'll be as if you were mixing a light blue. It'll sort of cool it down because it's not as warm as this cadmium red light, and it'll lighten it at the same time. So it's, could do the same thing with a cobalt blue and like a white mixture, or this Naples Yellow. But I like this because it's just two colors, and if I have to go back and mix a similar color, it's really easy to go back and match that if I need to. So it's one way to keep things simplified and efficient as you work through this. All right, so what I'm going, that's really cool, but in temperature, it might not be right. I'm going to take this yellow ochre, and that will warm it up a bit. And I'm going to block in some things here. we're just going to stab at this. I don't know if it's going to be right. And as I move down in this area, I'm going to take more of this cadmium red light. And what I've done is I've mixed it into this brown mixture that I have for the undertone. That ties the color in with this background color at the same time. You know, so it keeps the painting sort of unified in a tone. All right, let's do that. I'm going to go back to this yellow ochre mixture, just grade up a little bit, and continue up the side of his face. I want to go a lot more gray as we get towards the top of his head. I think that's going to work nicely. And I'm really just concerned myself with some shaping right now. I'm not really worried about any of the details. It's almost like we're taking something from out of focus and bringing it into focus over a period of, over just sort of moving shapes around the canvas until it has the right feel that we're going for. And I'm going to take this cadmium red light, some more of it, and some more of this. I'm going to go into the burnt umber. The burnt umber is more of a, it's a warmer brown. And going to keep basically these same colors, yellow ochre, cadmium red light, and making an in-between colors as we go across his forehead. And that can turn into the shadow shapes where his eyes are. Not going to worry about the whites of his eyes or anything like that. There we go. And I'm going to go with this darker color. I'm going to bring some raw umber in there. Raw umber is a little bit cooler. I'm going to keep this cadmium red light color. And basically I'm going to paint the shape of his face over here. Like this. And I'm going to take it a bit darker as we go down his cheekbone over here. And over this side of his face. And a lot of this is going to obscure into his hair, so we're going to just continue. I'm going to take just raw umber and knock in that dark part, his hair over here. Bring his hair like this. I'm going to use some of my medium, which is a linseed oil and mixture of linseed oil and liquin, and that helps to thin the paint down. It keeps it more workable. I'm going to block in his shoulders, and I think what I'm doing, my mistake here is I'm getting caught up in trying to make it look like a Jim Carrey instead of just covering the canvas with paint to begin with. So I'm going to refocus for what I'm doing and just go to the things that I know I can do that don't take a lot of like careful decision making. It includes hair and background and any number of things. And what that'll help me do, I'm hoping, is it'll help me to loosen up a bit and to start to see a little bit more clearly what I'm doing. And by not focusing on, is this mouth in the right spot, or am I getting the shape of, getting his eyes to look correctly, like I can focus on the broader strokes here, so to speak. Let's create a background color that'll be like the environment that he's in. So when we're painting a background, we're not just thinking of this like just something that we don't think about. The background is important as any other part of this portrait. And the one thing to think about is that this person is in an environment that has air in it. And if we think of air as like a scattered volume of particles or something, it is a thing. Like, imagine, space was pizza sauce and you were a pepperoni. Kind of like that. So we want to make this look like he is in breathable air, and that is going to be in the background. What's lighting up the color of the background is going to actually also be part of what's going on in the colors of his face. So that environment and that light is as important as how to determine what your colors are going to be as the anything else. So there's the source of light, whatever temperature that is, that's also going to be affecting the background. I'm going to take a raw umber, which is cooler, and so one of the things that I think about when creating environmental space is that generally things that are cooler fall into the background and things that are warmer come forward. His face will have a lot more warmer tones on it in the background. So I'm taking some raw umber, and I think I'm going to, so I'm mixing it into some of this flesh tones that I already have mixed up. And I think I'm going to mix in a little Naples Yellow and maybe just a touch of this Indigo Blue. Let's see how that works. I think that looks pretty good. So let's just cover this background. There's another thing to think about, and this is from like landscape painting 101, is when you have a sky, and we're not saying that he's in the sky, but to create a sense of depth of space, I'm going to make the part of the background that's closer to the horizon line a little lighter. And if you're painting like skies and landscape paintings, that tends to be what happens. It's things that are closer to the horizon are lighter and warmer in tone, and the things that are closer horizontally to the sun are also lighter and warmer in tone. And as you get farther away from the sun, they get cooler and darker, and you get farther up away from the horizon, the same thing. So I'm just using that sort of logic to block in this background. I might also, to make his face pop out more on this light side, well, I'm going to keep this all the same tone just for the sake of right now. We can go back and just adjust the tones a little bit later if we need to. And you can get, I tend to stay pretty thin at this point, so you're seeing a lot of transparency, or like it's not like a really thick cover of paint. And the reason I do it that way is to keep my colors from getting too muddy if I rework them, especially early on in the painting. Also, you don't want to have to be working really thin layers over thick layers. The thick layers will dry slower than the thin layers, and if you have thin layers over thick layers of paint, your painting might crack over time. And if that's concerning to you, that's something to keep in mind. So I'm continuing to do the background stuff. All right, let's bring his flesh tone down into here. And if you don't know what you're doing, do it quicker. That seems to be something that I like to do. Like, I start moving quickly so as not to second guess myself and you get stuck in a rut of noodling on one area of a painting. So I just move around the painting, and once you have sort of the whole thing covered, then you can come back and make adjustments to things that are working or not working. Let's see here. All right. So now I got pretty much everything covered. Let me mix up some more of this darker. I got a little, let's put a little Aliziran Crimson in here. So see the paint's too thin now, and it's going into that thicker paint, so it's smudging it around, which is not what I want. We're not going to get too worried about that though. I want to kind of block in where his lip is right here. Also, the Aliziran Crimson is transparent, so it just looks, it has that effect. All right, and then there's a shadow under his lip right here, and under his bottom lip. I'm going to take a little bit of a lighter tone, kind of create the light hitting his bottom lip. I'm going to work some of his background color in here. See how that works. Sometimes these paintings take a while to find out, like, there's like a little formula that you'll discover for each painting. Will have this little key that makes it work. I'm gonna paint in the lighter side of the shadows. I'm gonna use this background color, just mixing it right into that wet paint. And I'm thinking of this more as like I'm drawing in the shape of his face right here. All right, now I'm going to go over to the other side of his face. I'm taking some Naples Yellow. And Naples Yellow works like a neutral tone. It tends to gray things down more than it does tint things yellow. But it's a very warm grayish tone. I get under that eye right there, and I think I'll take some burnt sienna and go back over here. It's a little bit lighter than I have it. Just gonna lighten that up a little bit. And now I'm gonna take actually a Payne's gray. in burnt umber, which will warm up that gray and keep kind of a brownish tone. These are these really brown puppy dog eyes over here. I'll block that in right there. Go over here too. Just kind of get that eye in there. And then I'm gonna take some of this color from the background that we used and start shaping in around his eyes a bit. And if things are in the right spot, they'll start working fairly quickly, and I'm not quite sure I have it there yet. All right, so let me grab some more of this brownish tone, Portland gray, or this Payne's gray. The Payne's gray is a very dark gray without being black. Depending on the manufacturer of the paint, there's lots of different brands that make Payne's gray. Some of them tend to be bluer, more have a tint of color to them. Some of them tend to be very neutral in tone. It's a matter of, I can't remember which ones are better for those circumstances, so that's something that you'll have to maybe I have many different Payne's gray tubes, and the ones I'm using are Windsor and Newton, I think, and they tend to give me the results that I like. So I think the key is to find something that works for you, and that you will understand what kind of results you're going to get if you use something from that manufacturer, rather than trying to worry about getting the whatever the best or the most recommended. A lot of it is personal preference, I think. All right. Now I'm going back over this color. So we have this peachy color, and I'm going over it with grayer tones. I think that tends to look more like light on a face. That's probably too gray. You don't want it to be too cold necessarily. I like painting gray tones over more colorful tones though. Tends to look more natural, I think. The better you get with using gray tones and neutrals, the more natural your colors will tend to look. It's been my experience. And as I'm doing this, I'm laying in these brush strokes that are describing some of the form in his face. So that follows his cheek down. There's a musculature that goes down, and then he has muscles around his mouth like this. So it's almost like I'm using this to help me draw things in. And as I get down lower, the tones get darker and a little more gray. So I'm going to follow. I'm gonna use this Payne's gray. I think that's going. Is that gonna work? Yeah, I think so. Just picking some raw umber too. So as we find the right tones, he doesn't have a really sharp. He has a pretty nice key light coming from this direction, but one of the difficulties of this kind of a pose as a straight on pose is it doesn't give you a lot of things to jump on. Like when I was doing the Rick Grimes last week, it was kind of a 3/4 angle, so I had the shape of his eyebrow and the line of his cheek to follow. It was a little more information for capturing a likeness. And these straight on shots can be very difficult. I think they're more challenging to get things to look right because you don't have as much space, depth of field to work with in the pose itself. So there isn't a lot of, I mean, the silhouette doesn't do anything for you. Whereas if you have a 3/4 view, you might be able to get a likeness just with the silhouette by itself. Or if you have a profile view, the same thing. But the one thing that is a problem with the straight profile view is similar to what we have with this, is that it flattens itself out. It's just a shape with things coming at you or going away. It's like trying to describe a cube in 3 dimensions, but you're only looking at it straight on. How do you let somebody know that that's actually a cube? And it requires more trickery. All right, let's get a nostril in there where we think it's going to go. Does that look about right? I don't know. Maybe. Start there. Let's then work the shape of his nose a little bit. The shape of his nose, his eyebrow. I'm going to go and just kind of knock in the light of his eye right here. And I'm, for the time being, going to leave it similar color as his flesh tone. Instead of making it white or a completely different color, I find that using tones that are similar to the rest of the flesh really work well for this. He's got bushier eyebrows though. Let's expand on that. Let's also, I'm going to dip more into this raw sienna, I think, and yellow ochre. Just see if that modulates from that tone over his forehead a little better. So maybe, I think I have his nose way too short. There's a lot wrong with this painting right now. Okay. I'm going to just start indicating things, I think. I want his, let's see, what he looks like Elephant Man right now. It's not the look I'm going for. All right, what's not working here? That is, what's going on here? Let's see. I think this shape of his jawline is not correct. And what I'm going to do is, I got a significant amount of paint. I'm just going to wipe that out, I think, and just repaint it back in. I'm going to take some burnt sienna and this raw umber color down here and go somewhere else with it. I don't know why I felt compelled to go over there, but here we go. All right. All right. I think what I want to do is, so look, I think that looks better. I think I don't have it quite the way I want it. I'm going to mix some cadmium red light with some indigo blue. I find that works really well for making darker tones. that you can shift from a cool to a, that's too warm, to a warmer, cooler tone. It does darken it up, and it's better. I would prefer to use that color than using black. It tends to make nice flesh tones, I think. So let's just get a little bit more bold with this. Describe his chin. I'm gonna blend those shapes together. Obscure things. There's a tendency to try to draw everything out, like get everything like where's his cheekbone, where's his jawline. But we don't always have to do that. You have to remember that the eyes tend to jump to conclusions, and you can obscure something completely, like his shape of his, like his face, and his hair and his shirt over here can all become probably just one shape. And because we've seen enough faces, we know that it's not, that there's something there. There's enough indication here to give us an idea. There is a face here. And so we will make assumptions, our eyes will make assumptions for us, and it will read correctly. And then when you get up close to look at it, you see that there's no distinction between all those things. So that is one sort of trick you can do. And that will keep you focused on the overall shaping. And then if you later decide you want to separate those elements out, you can do that. I think that's the direction I'm going to take with this one. And I'm going to do that with the Cadmium Red LIght and this Indigo Blue. More of that Indigo Blue on there. And I'm going to continue to go darker with this. I'm going to pull in some burnt umber. Keeps it a little bit on the warmer side. And maybe it's starting to work a little better, I think. Okay. There is, okay, his eye, oops, I don't know. Let's do that. And there's a shadow under his eye over here. And again, I'm going to just make this one shape. The trick is to determine like exactly what the shape is that we're looking at here. What's causing it? How is the structure of his face working in the anatomical structure? Is it giving us the right emotional quality? So those are all the things that we're looking at. So I go to pull that down, and looks like I'm going to pull his mouth down a little bit. I think it's starting to look okay. I can see it kind of heading in the right direction, so that's good. Let's go on with this obscuring edges track and blend his eye in with his eyebrow. This is why it's also a good idea to have multiple references of someone's face so that you can see from a different angle what's going on and help you make decisions about how to how to describe that form. It might not always be apparent in just one image that you have of somebody. This is one of the difficulties of working from reference rather than working from life, is trying to I want that darker. Is when you're working from life, you can see in 3 dimensions what you're looking at, and it makes it much easier to then translate that, in my opinion anyway, translate that into 2 dimensions. When you're looking at references, you have to look at something in 2 dimensions and then translate that into 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional surface. It's a little more removed, and I think can make things more difficult. So I would always suggest, if you can, that you work from live models. But that's, often difficult to get people corralled together to sit down for you. But you can, it's much easier to draw from live models, which you can do when we're allowed to go back out in public again. You can do that by going to coffee shops or restaurants, and anywhere you see people sitting around, practice drawing them. And while they're moving around, what that forces you to do is to not copy poses, and it forces you to translate, understand what you're looking at, and sort of more of a shorthand version. You have to learn how to see, which is what the real basis of image making is there's some of it that is understanding what you're looking at, and painting what you see, and then some of it is having a deeper understanding of the subject matter, so that you can also rely on your understanding to help you understand what you're looking at. So you can't paint what you see if you don't know how to see it. If you don't know what you're looking at. I remember when I was in college, I would go to the zoo to draw tigers and whatnot, and it was really difficult because I went in the morning when they were moving around, and my first drawings looked like gerbils or something. It was really aggravating. And it was because I didn't really understand their anatomy well enough. I of course, when I saw a tiger, I could recognize it as a tiger, but then to have to quickly draw it onto a page was a whole other thing. Especially because those tigers don't they don't sit around and wait for you to make sure you got the like, I can't say, hey, hold that for a second. They don't care. Either they're not holding anything, they're like walking around their enclosures, or they're sleeping in the back. You can't see them. So I go there early in the morning when they were moving around, about the time they would get fed, to do these things. And the other thing I did is I started going to the parks and drawing people throwing frisbees and doing whatnot, and really getting good at drawing gestural movements of people. So you focus on how simple line work can you do to make somebody look like they're moving, or they're alive, they're doing something, even if it's something as simple as standing. Like how do people posture and move their weight around and lump and all that kind of stuff is what makes people look like people, rather than some object that sat still for you. That seems to be, in my mind, lifeless. And when I want to make a painting of someone, I want them to look like they were alive and they were feeling something, and it's easier to jump on those things when it's a really extreme pose. But how do you do that when it's something as simple as like in this pose? Like, there's a lot of emotion on this guy's face. What is that emotion? And the way you get at that is you build some empathy for people. You are a person. You are people too, and you know what it feels like to be sad, or to be heartbroken or lonely or whatever might be going on in this scene. And what I'm going for is I start to paint this and then I start to recognize it looks how I feel when am in that state of mind. And so that's where I'm trying to achieve with some of these exercises of creating emotion. And the the thing to do is, for me anyway, is to not really be focused. You want these subtleties, and you want it to be authentic. You don't want it to be always a caricature. You can do it in a caricature style, but it can still feel real. And you can make that. You can use the caricature angle to really drive home the reality of the emotion. You can exaggerate those things to really show that that's what's going on in somebody's mind. So like when I'm doing paintings that have big hands and all these other things, those things tend to go along with that quality, that whatever that might be, in describing the person that is a painting of. And you don't have to the more you get away from copying surface details and everything you're doing, the more lifelike your paintings will get. And a lot of my paintings have very little resemblance to the reference. Sometimes it's really important to not allow yourself to get too married to the copying things as I sit here and try to copy things. I hope that makes sense. This is still a long way off, but it seems like it's going in the right direction. Like we will I'm continuing just to basically use the same mixture of colors to go around and create highlights, shadows, and warm and cool tones. And so I'm there's a shift from this, this side of the space is in light, this side's in shadow, and there is some sort of reflected light on his face, and it's going to be a cooler tone over here. And where it transitions, there's going to be some warmth, I think. Also, this Belgian linen, I don't always work on this Belgian linen. It's a lot slicker, smoother of a surface, and so the paint is doing things different than I'm quite used to in my regular substrates that I use. But I like to mix up things every now and then to keep me on my toes, I guess. Also, the Belgian linen is a very nice surface to paint on. I like there's some good qualities about the smoothness of this surface, and it's very taut. I mean, tight. The canvas is tight. And yeah, seems to be giving me some challenges here. But generally, on any sort of new thing, I usually end up finding the groove to making it work properly. And that's just a matter of I keep playing around until I find sort of, like I was saying earlier, whatever that key, there's a key to it. Every painting will be different that way. And even if you're using the same palette colors, the lighting in every painting is different. There's always something different going on. If you, I find that if I would take the same, if I had a technique and an approach that I did that was really too mechanical, that the paintings lose some life at that point, at least in my work. And I always want to have things um, that are kind of discovering something in every painting. You know, it helps to grow as an artist that way. If I did exactly the same thing in every painting, I think that would tend to get boring to make, and I don't want my paintings to be boring to make. In fact, the goal, well, not the goal. One of the things that I strive for is that the paintings look like they were fun to make, even though some paintings are a complete battle of trying to make it work. But if at the end it can look like it was somewhat matter of fact and it was fun, it looks like if you see the pleasure in making a painting, generally those paintings are fun to look at too. You can sense that the artist really had a good time and it was fun, and you get to, as the viewer, get to enjoy some of that fun, you know, by proxy, I guess. Okay, I'm just still going into defining shapes around his mouth, on his lips, and I'm using a lot of this raw burnt sienna and cadmium red light into this indigo blue here, hitting the bottom part of his lip. Going like that. Okay, then he's got this shape on his chin. We're going a little long today. I don't feel like stopping quite yet, so we'll keep going. I try to keep these live streams in about an hour. Guess it's going to depend on if my I think I'm moving my palette all over the place too, so maybe you can't see what I'm doing. Trying to keep these relatively short so that, one, my camera that I'm using to look at my palette is an old cell phone, and the way I have it set up is not allowing it to, it'll die, and I don't want it to die before we get anywhere with it. We're in the middle of something, so I'm going to continue to work on this for a little bit, I think. Okay, I think this is starting to kind of come together now. I know I had some people want me to, you know, asked if I would talk about the making a living as an artist, and no, I didn't really get to that today. And there's a whole, I don't even know where to start with that, to be honest. I think I would like to dive into that with a little more thought. I can say a couple of things really quickly about it. One, there is no formula to it. Two, you're going to have to do it yourself. Like, I can tell you what I did and how I made things work, but those times are gone. And so what's going to work then isn't necessarily going to work now. But the sort of fundamentals, if there are such a thing for that, is you must do the work, and then you must put it in front of people with a price tag. And you must do it yourself, because nobody is going to come along and do it for you. And if you can't figure out how to do it, there's nobody else that's going to be able to that well either. And if someone does and you don't know how to do it, and then they move on to somebody else who can, they can make more profit off of it for whatever reason, and you don't know how to do it yourself, you're going to be left right back where you started, which is not knowing how to do it. So I think my suggestions off the top of my head, and the fundamental is to, you need to learn how to talk about your work, and you need to put it in front of people in a real way. I don't think there is some value in social media, but that ain't gonna cut it. Because those things can be taken away. They can become toxic or irrelevant. And in fact, the only thing that's going to happen is that however you start is going to become obsolete. So there's another sort of motto I've lived by, and that's not only when it comes to creating art, but pretty much it seems to ring true with anything, but especially when it comes to a business with your art or making art or anything like that, is you need to always get out before you're pushed out. And so you can't, well, you can, but you'll find that if you stay somewhere too long, that the transience of life will inevitably take over, and you will be looking for you'll be stuck. So you can't stay anywhere very long. You have to keep moving constantly. And that is in the creation of your artwork, it's in the selling of your artwork, it's all of those things. So it's good to keep from there's no arriving anywhere. There's not going to ever be a place where you get to and you feel like, oh, I finally made it. That's an illusion. And you'd be better served to get rid of that out of your head really quick. It's a constant moving around. It's like in that movie, I think it was the movie 2012 or something. It's like this apocalyptic movie where they're at the airport and the the meteorites are coming, and they're getting on an airplane, and they're trying to take off, and as they're trying to take off, the run rate is dropping off behind them into the abyss. And at the end of the runway is a hedge of trees that they must clear. And so they have to outrun the falling away of the earth and at the same time take off and get over the trees. And that is kind of what it's like, and it never ends. But that's not to scare you away. That's what makes it fun. Is there's never a finish line. There's no destination to arrive at. And you might have brief moments of feeling like you're doing it, but the simple truth is that when I first started selling color copies of my paintings from Kinko's on the boardwalk in Venice Beach, I was doing it. And all I'm doing now is a variation of that theme. It's kind of like you get to operate your own clown car, and you get to try to get as many clowns into it as possible. How many clowns can you get into your clown car? How many can you talk to into joining your whatever it is that you're doing? And I'm not saying that people that are supporting my work or anything are clowns or anything like that, but it's more like a figure of speech. I think it's there's think of it like anything like a game. And it's an art in and of itself. I think I'm getting too distracted. I think Yeah, crap. I think I might call it stops for today. I will work some more on this during the week. I've taken a little bit of a break from all my studio renovations as I'm trying to get things set up to do these streams better, and I've working on some bigger pieces that I needed the space for, so I've had to like throw a bunch of stuff out. And anyways, I am taking a break from some of that. I'm going to be focusing on doing some more production, and I will rework and revisit this painting as part of that and post it online. I'll probably just post this on YouTube. Like, I don't know, Facebook is kind of a not really excited about Facebook anymore. All right. Well, this is looking pretty rough, but I'm pretty confident that I will sort this thing out. Do a couple of quick things, I think. I'm gonna bring this dark tone a bit here. Do that. I'll figure out what's working on this painting soon enough. So I think I'm going to stop it for today. And if you guys have any other, questions or ideas or things you want me to talk about or anything like that, just let me know. And I'll try not to forget them next week. So like I said, I'm doing these streams, trying to do it every Friday at 3 to 4. And well, yeah, we'll keep going from there. See where these things had take us. All right, let me stop the stream.